Welcome to today's edition of WooNews TV, where we bring spiritual concepts into the mainstream to make them more relatable for you. Today, the topic is one man's journey to his divine self. Welcome, my guest, Hugo Chacon. Did I say it pronounced correctly?
That's great. Hi, Julie.
Thank you
So good to
so
see
much for
you.
being here, my friend. I'm so grateful for this.
I'm grateful
So I
too.
have a personal connection to Hugo, and I recently saw him and thought he would be perfect for this show. There isn't a lot of information that I've seen about a man's journey to coming home to himself. And I knew a little bit about his story, and so I wanted to share it with all of you, or wanted him to share it with all of you, I should say, because I think it'll be insightful, and I think you can have some good insights for the men out there in the world, my friend.
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Julie. So grateful to be here and share my experiences. I don't claim to know how to do it but I can just share what I've been through and what it's taken to get here to a place of beginning to love myself unconditionally because it's an everyday journey now.
Oh, I'm sure. And
Yeah,
as you know, we teach what we've learned and what we are still learning. So
that's right.
you are a teacher in this moment. So thank you for that.
Hmm.
Okay, let's start. I'm looking down here at my notes here. Let's start with your early years.
Wow. It was, looking back, I could see how what happened back then is so connected to my journey today. At 2 years old, I was brought from El Salvador. We crossed the border through Texas and took a train from LA from Texas to LA. But my first 2 years, I never had both parents in the home. Either my mom or my dad were here in the States sending back money to El Salvador. So my main caretaker was my grandmother. And for me, she showed me what love is, unconditional love is. She was there for me those 2 years. And knowing what I know now, how important those first 2 years are,
Mhm.
I can reflect back on those moments of not having both parents there and how that impacted me.
Is she still living, your grandmother?
No, she's not. She's
Okay.
passed, but she's still with me.
Right.
I see her a lot when I'm
I
in
was gonna say,
ceremonies.
I
Yeah.
see something behind you. There is definitely a presence.
Yeah, I see her a lot when I'm in a ceremony or when I'm doing the holding space for other brothers. She's there with me, guiding me. She's my true north,
That's
to
great.
keep going forward. Yeah, yeah. So, um, interesting enough, the first piece that comes forward that was impactful was the first time I saw my dad again after not seeing him for a year. I remember on the journey from Texas to LA, I was pretty much given everything that I wanted, right? Just to keep me
Mhm.
quiet, not draw attention
Mhm.
to us. And the first time that I saw my father, I wanted my mom to pick me up, and she didn't. So I threw a tantrum. And the first time was him reprimanding me for the tantrum and hitting me.
Mm.
That was my first contact with him. And now, as I stand here as a 45-year-old man, looking back, I could see how that shaped some of my journey moving forward.
Sure. Especially now that you have children.
Oh, especially now that I have children,
Yeah.
yes, because it's been such a lesson for me. I always said I never wanted to be like my dad, but the more I resisted it, the more it showed up for me.
Sure.
And so I had to get to a place of the inner understanding that it was about unlearning so much that I saw growing up to allow the new learnings to come in.
And I think
And
that's true for everyone. You just became aware of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And within that space of the unlearning and the learning, there's the guidance from spirit that keeps me,
Mhm.
the grace, kind of like the
Right.
grace that keeps it moving forward that I can acknowledge now, you know.
Okay. So after you saw your father, you're on your way back to LA. You had your first physical assault. And
Yeah. And from there on, I mean, it was fast forward to, in my mind, are like little thresholds that I crossed now.
sure.
But fast forward to when I was 6 years old, I experienced being sexually abused by another man.
Mm.
And literally, I can now tell you that that was the day that life lost its magic for me. That day, life became a struggle where the wonder of it all just left.
That was
And
your
it's
wounding, as they say, yeah.
it was a deep one. And it would just so happen that the way that he brought me in was saying, "Do you want to see a magic trick?"
Ugh,
And so I felt like that day the innocence left.
absolutely.
Now I understand that my soul left, and it all became this struggle of just making it through another day because
Mhm.
I continued to be babysat at the same place. So the gentleman was gone, but I kept going back to the same place every day after that for a couple
Where you
years
weren't protected and you
where
weren't.
yeah, I wasn't safe.
Yeah.
And so it was every day being reminded of that. And as I was thinking about that and feeling into that, I grew up through the Rodney King riots. So when literally I was in the middle of it, so my whole neighborhood was burning.
Mm.
And
How
I
old were you
remember
then?
I was, well, I want to say
About.
nine, maybe 9 or
Okay.
10. I can't
Okay.
be completely sure, but I remember where I lived, across the street was the building where the abuse happened. So my house was here and the building was here across the street. And I remember standing out there watching all this go down, and this car pulled up. And I remember them throwing a Molotov cocktail into the bottom of the building, and the whole building went up in flames. And this is when I was introduced to polarities because part of me felt so sad to see the building go because I had friends that lived there. But there was this part of me that was so happy to see that landmark leave because every day I saw the building was a reminder of what happened.
That's where it happened.
And that's where it happened.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so watching the building go up in
Yeah.
flames brought this
Yeah.
feeling of like satisfaction, which I didn't understand.
Sure.
Why am I feeling good about this happening to my friends that they're losing their homes?
Because the house of terror for you was gone.
Right. And that's my introduction to having these two feelings at the same time.
Mm.
And from that point forward, as I walk my journey, I've had that awareness that I'm constantly feeling two things at once, two things at once.
Well, this is a realm of duality,
Yes, yes.
but you
S-
seem to have, this is, I guess, a question, not a statement. Do you feel you walk uh, in tandem with them, or do you feel you fight one because it's different than the other?
Now I can say I could flow,
Yeah.
but maybe I could say 5 years ago, I was walking against them. I was trying to, in my mind, when I started this journey, I thought that at some point these thoughts would leave, like
Yeah.
these negative thoughts, these judgments, these like these I'm not worthy enough, or I'm broken, or I'm not lovable, things will leave
The pain.
the pain. But what I have found is that as I am willing to lean more into what is the source of these pains,
Mhm.
this new voice has risen, this new energy has risen that says, no, you are worthy. You are okay. You are safe. Continue. Continue. So as I lean more into the pain, the other side of the grace and the celebration is becoming more.
Mm.
And they're coexisting, which is a very interesting experience as a
Right.
man.
That's, I guess that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
They coexist.
they
But you didn't
coexist.
have this awareness at 9 when
I
this
did
happened.
not.
Okay.
I did
So then
not.
what happened with your teenage years? How did this past play out in your teenage years?
Well, I became a survivor. I did what I had to do to survive. And throughout my teenage years, from about 9 to 15, I experienced physical abuse from my father. He was, that's the way he disciplined.
It
If
continued.
it continued with him, if I did something that was out of line, his answer was a beating. That's just the way it was.
Was the same thing with your siblings,
It
Hugo?
was. It
Okay.
was. But my brother was 7 years older, so they stopped for him a lot sooner than me.
Yeah.
And I remember again, it goes back to the duality piece because as these things as the physical abuse was happening, I would have these thoughts of like, how can somebody who loves me so much hurt me so bad? How can he say he loves me and yet be willing to hurt me so much?
Right. Right.
And that was a question I constantly asked myself because he would say to me, it hurts me more than it hurts you. Now that I'm a father, I understand that at a 45-year-old perspective, I get that. because I can go back and empathize of how much pain he must have been in to feel that he had to hurt something he loved so much.
Okay. Did you just come to this awareness recently, or have you had this awareness for quite some time? Because, I talk a lot about forgiving the why someone does what they do, because you can always forgive the what. So the why for your father would be his own pain, but that's a tough place for some people to get to, especially as an abused child.
Yeah, that started coming in probably 2 years ago when I started introduced to the concept of being grateful for trauma.
Okay.
The
Okay.
possibility was opened for me to go back and look at these traumas as almost initiations or like a ceremony of beginning my journey.
Oh,
And
well, speaking of beginning your journey, you had said in your early 20s you had an experience that started you on this or woke you up to something.
yeah, so at 21, I was working on a floral shop
Okay.
as a floral designer, and we ended up going to West Africa to go do a wedding for the prime minister's daughter. And long story short, we were flown. We were given the five-star treatment. We were eating at the finest hotel restaurants, staying at the finest hotels. But for me, what was happening was this awareness of here I am having this five-course meal, and right outside, there's kids and families digging through the trash to get their meal.
Mm.
And this was happening at the same, again, that goes back to a duality piece,
Duality.
introduction to this. It's happening at the same time. And part of my soul couldn't put that in its place. It
Couldn't
didn't
coexist
understand.
with that.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And then it was the longest 2 weeks of my life because I would wake up thinking I was home. I wanted to be home. I didn't want to be there anymore. And then I was watching others that I was with actually enjoying themselves and having fun and being there. And here I am having this awareness of this peace going on. And that's when the whole thing of like, there's much more to this than what I think there is.
So
And
much more
that's
to what?
to life, to
Okay.
myself.
Yeah. How did that experience bring that up to the surface for you, Hugo?
Because if I'm experiencing the best things that I could have at that
Mhm.
moment, I mean, fine, I mean, the best of the best.
Right.
And yet I didn't feel at peace with myself.
You weren't fulfilled in any
I
way with
wasn't fulfilled in any way. If anything,
that.
there was guilt to that, to being there and having that. And I didn't understand that. It goes back to like watching the building burn down,
Mhm.
right? There's a satisfaction and then there's this guilt of like, why am I so happy this is happening? Because people are losing their homes.
Mhm.
Well, it was the same thing there years later. It's like, what, how come I'm not enjoying this when there's this happening on the side that, it doesn't resonate. So
Okay.
looking back, that lesson was
Wow.
put in front of me constantly. Like, how can my father who loves me so much hurt me so bad? So it was like this constant questioning of like these two things coexisting at the same time.
Glaring contrast and
Yeah.
duality. However, I mean, I imagine that every victim of abuse has that same question. How can someone abuse me this much when they say they love me so much? So after that experience in Africa, what did you do then? Did you take that experience and do something differently with your life or with your path?
Then began the process of just exploring myself in different ways. That was things started showing up. I took a 2-year course in spiritual psychology. It was just
How
for
old were you when you did that?
probably about 20, right after the trip, so 22,
Okay, early
23,
20s. Okay.
early 20s. And then I got married real quick around 23, 24, divorced, got married again, divorced. So those relationships really pushed me into even a faster, exploration of myself and questioning and everything. And
Did you do that during these relationships?
I
Did you do
did,
your self-reflection? Okay.
yeah. So it's like these relationships were happening as I was doing myself reflection. And like they both went hand in hand. The lessons and the work was like constantly like this, kind of just navigating
Always
it.
works that way, doesn't it? But not everybody's aware
Always,
of it. So
always, yes. And
yeah.
so after my first divorce came in the second relationship, which really taught me a lot about myself. And now I've been married for 15 years and going, and doing the best we can and moving forward. But it's been a grind for myself to really continue to say yes to the self reflection.
Mhm.
Because
And have
sometimes
the
it,
courage to go there.
ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
but that's my
What is
commitment.
there, is there one thing you can pinpoint as a, not the most significant, but a major contributor to where you are now? One,
Yes.
okay, what would that be? It,
So one of the biggest pieces that came forward was, so for me, after experiencing the sexual abuse, this this energy stuck with me. This like feeling of always being dirty.
Mhm.
This feeling of always being like not clean enough or broken. And as a matter of fact, it manifested where I would take like 3 or 4 showers a day
Mm,
because I could not keep myself clean.
right.
And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why that feeling was with me all the time. And it showed up in my relationships. I would lie, manipulate, do whatever I had to do to get gratification. Like it was just this dirty, for me, it was like a dirty living.
Right.
And along with that dirty living came tons of guilt and shame. So then I
Did you
ran,
know at the time when this happened that it was wrong, Hugo? Did you know that it was wrong?
it felt out of alignment with
Okay.
how I wanted to be.
Right. Okay.
Because then I ran to porn, I ran to food, I ran to all these things to numb it. And that worked for a while. But then the pain got so big and it really showed up when my kids were born because I wasn't willing to shower my kids because I was scared I was going to touch them the wrong way.
Mhm.
I
Mm.
wasn't willing
Wow.
to be affectionate because touch was dangerous to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I knew something in me like woke up and was like, bro, like you have to do something about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And it got so painful and dark. Sometimes I didn't want to wake up the next day. I I thought it'd be better if I wasn't here, like I was in the way of life. And the pressure got so much that I found I found one workshop through Preston Smiles that introduced me to like somatic release, breath work, ecstatic dance. First time ever in my life I ever experienced that, and I experienced this release in my body and this connection at moments that I didn't know was even possible.
So you felt
But
like you were coming back into your body.
coming back
Yeah.
in,
And
oh
connecting.
yeah, and what came out of
Because
that was,
trauma typically pulls us right out of our body.
oh, I was gone.
And we have to deliberately take steps to return.
And that was the initial push off the cliff, as they
Right.
say, the jumping off
Right.
of it, because the one thing that I came away with that was that there was this belief in me that I wasn't worthy. I
Mm.
wasn't worthy of a spirit's love.
Mm. That's a big one. Yeah,
It's a,
that's a big one.
because in my mind I had a judgment like if spirit was real, then how could it let it all this happen to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a whole thing now where I am of rebuilding my relationship with source, and and being able to go back to these experiences and see God in them and see spirit in them and how I was pulled through and how things happened to get me to where I am, where I'm sitting here talking to you now. Because there were
And how
times,
are you developing that relationship with source?
the best way I can describe it to you is like letting go of the letting go. Like there's this awareness, like I've come to this space where I understand there's a higher power and there's a bigger presence than me.
Mhm.
And as soon as my mind thinks it can name it, I gotta let it go.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I have to reintroduce myself and reintroduce it to myself again, and then
As
go
if
from
for the
there
first time.
as if for the first time.
Oh,
Because as
that's
soon as
great.
I think I've understood it,
Yeah.
then I try to compartmentalize it, put a label on it, put a name on it. So it's like this piece of like, okay, yeah, I know I'm being guided, I'm being led. And as soon as I think I know what it is, I gotta let that piece go.
Are you familiar with samadhi?
No.
Okay, it's like the final limb of the 8 limbs of yoga. There's a 3-part movie series on YouTube about it, and it's exactly that. It's that which cannot be named or contained. It's exactly what you're saying. So I
Yeah.
didn't know if you were familiar with that. What's your practice, Hugo? What's your practice? Meditation, yoga? I mean, what do you
Running.
do? Is this where the sacred sons comes in?
For myself personally is running.
Okay.
I fell in love with running 2 years ago. Right when COVID hit, it was the only thing I could do. And running gave me that place of connection
Hmm.
and what I needed.
That runner's high kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to be able to contemplate things at a different place. And then yeah, Sacred Sons showed up for me 4 years ago, not knowing what it was, not even knowing what men's work was at the time.
And what is it?
Men's work?
Or sacred sons, sacred sons.
Oh, for me, Sacred Sons was a place where I could show up, be unapologetically myself, whatever that looked like, angry, happy, sad, and have other men that I in the past found threatening and scary help me through these thresholds, through
Mhm.
these moments of fear or anger or whatever it was. Because the first time I showed up to an event there were 150 men. And here's the part you have to understand, Julie. I was told early on that I couldn't trust men that
Oh,
looked like me.
right. Or
That
just
that
men,
that
period.
yeah, that didn't look like me.
Right.
But yet, all the traumas that I experienced were at the hands of men that looked like me. So pretty much, I couldn't trust any
Duality once again.
once again. So showing up and seeing this absolute rainbow of men there from
Mhm.
different places, I had to work through a lot of cultural pieces, unlearn a lot of pieces that I was told, stories that weren't mine that I had taken on.
Sure.
Because when I showed up, my body didn't feel safe,
Mhm.
but my soul did. And
Oh,
as much as my body wanted to leave, the soul was like, no, you're staying
duality once again.
once again. And that's when that other energy started showing up more and more. Because this one was like, leave, get in your car, you got to go. And then the other energy came in and said, no, no, this is where you need to be. Trust me.
Hmm. Wow, and you followed through with that.
And I stayed.
What else is part of your practice that you want to share, that you're comfortable sharing?
Hmm.
You had mentioned ceremony before. Is that something you want to talk about?
Yeah. So for me, what has really assisted me in anchoring in the knowing that there's more to me than this body is being in ceremony,
Why don't
sitting
you
with,
explain what that is for
yeah,
people? Yeah.
yeah, sitting with plant medicine, sitting with
Okay.
ayahuasca, sitting with, mushrooms, sitting in different types of ceremonies, hape, all these medicines have showed up in my path, which has provided me with these moments of connection that I can go back to and say, I'm that. I'm
Mm,
not this.
right.
That's my truth. And
Yeah.
in these ceremonies, my grandma has shown up and told me that I'm gonna be okay.
Oh,
She said to me, I'm gonna be okay and I'm with you and just trust me and I won't let anybody hurt you. And that's a daily practice for me too, to
yeah,
ser-
sure.
to to release that belief that people want to hurt me. That's a big one.
Sure.
And it's an everyday thing for me.
I would imagine that some of that is also karmic. You came into this life with carryover with that, and then this lifetime experiences reinforced that
Yeah.
fear of your safety. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know you take this very seriously. You've been to Peru multiple times and for your ceremonies, and you take it very with a great deal of reverence.
To me, it's one of the most sacred things to do is
Yeah.
to communicate with the plants and have them show me things that I know my five senses can't show me. To have me feel things that are more real than anything I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And it lets me appreciate this piece. There are, I did not know it was possible to love the way I love my kids.
Oh.
I say I love, I describe it as love, but it's so much more than that. Like the word doesn't even begin to touch the feeling that I get with them.
Hmm.
It's so much bigger. And what I find is that anytime I allow myself to go into these patterns of limited thinking or irrational beliefs, it limits the way that I receive that. And I don't like that feeling.
Yeah. How you receive the love you have for your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Because
know,
it
and
cuts you off. It creates a separation when you're in that mental space.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in return, it reflects back to me how I'm not loving myself.
Hmm.
And I'm so tired of that piece. Because another huge awareness was this, that I picked up right where my abusers left off, 10 times worse. Because, yeah, he stopped sexually abusing me. My dad stopped physically abusing me, but I still continued emotionally abusing myself by talking to myself in a bad way. I physically abused myself by allowing myself to gain a lot of weight and have this cycle going.
Right.
Like I continued.
Yeah.
So when 5 years ago, like I can't do that. And today, I have to say to myself, it's like, no, no, I gotta love myself more than I don't. And so every time a thought comes up, I have to literally be like, okay, there's that thought. I have to like balance it out with something else. Duality again. It's like this piece,
Right.
this
Right.
constant game of keeping myself in a place of like receptivity where I can feel all of it. Because
Hmm.
if I can feel the pain, I can feel the grace.
Right.
And if I avoid the pain, I can't feel the grace.
Well, in this multidimensional world we live in, like the lower energies, the entities that are in this world, they're simply lower vibrations that haven't connected to the light yet. So the dark energies and emotions you feel just lack light, but it's still a part of you.
Yeah.
It's just the darker part of you. You know, I have to say, I think I said this to you last time I saw you. You all don't know Hugo, but he's a tall guy with all these tattoos on him. And you look at him coming, you're going, okay. And this guy, the closer he comes to you, all you feel is this big bear of energy of love. You just want to hug the man, even if you don't know him. But just he just exudes this love and this gentleness. That's how I've always, in fact, when I first heard about you, before I'd met you, I tuned in. I'm like, oh, he just has this loving energy. I felt that right away before I even met you.
Oh, thank you,
You just
Julia.
exude that. So I don't know if you want to speak to this, but as a male, can you give your awareness of a couple of things men really struggle with?
Ooh.
They can be general, they can be specific, because the media talks about toxic masculinity. In the spiritual world, we talk about distorted masculine and distorted feminine, and to elevate that to the divine masculine and the divine feminine in each of us. And so that's the language I use. But the distorted masculine is a very real thing that people struggle with and struggle to recognize and struggle to get out of.
Yeah. The thing that came forward as you said that was the integration of the feminine within me,
Mm-hmm.
because that shows up it showed up automatically for me. Like as soon as I started softening and leaning into the shadows and seeing what was there, this nurturing energy came in, which at first I didn't know how to handle. But the more that I sit with the energy and the more that I do the work, I understand that that's the grace and the nurturing piece that allows me to do the work with the little boy inside that still hurts sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took me a while to understand how connected that little boy inside was to my process.
Sure. Sure. That's true for everybody, right?
And then learning how to father him by refathering myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. It definitely does. And so for you, the biggest, well, for you, a significant part of moving into your divine masculine is bringing in the grace.
Yes.
So do you see that lacking in men today? That grace for themselves as well as grace for others? First and foremost, themselves, I would imagine, since that is a reflection of us internally.
Yeah, I can't speak for others, but for me, that was a huge piece because
Yeah.
I was so hard on myself. I felt like I was bringing a lot of negativity to spaces just because I was a man.
Well, and men aren't typically encouraged to speak, to share, to
Mm-mm.
emote, or to even identify their emotions. And I don't know about culturally, but I know in my family's Lebanese culture, it's not encouraged,
Oh no, I
maybe
mean,
exemplified.
in our culture, we were told that we didn't share our emotions.
Yeah.
It was dangerous. If anything, it became a target,
Oh,
and it was viewed as a weakness because as soon as they found out what was your trigger point,
yeah, use it against
they
you.
would just attack it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it became this thing of me growing up. And I'm going to share this one piece because I remember one time I was sick and tired of being hit and hurting. So my creativity kicked in one time. And the worst part about getting beatings from my father was that I knew when they were coming. They weren't
Mm,
surprises. Like I knew when I was going to get hit at what time. So the anxiety of anticipating that was huge. Remember one time I said, I'm done. I'm gonna put on 2 pairs of pants, 2 socks, 2 underwear, 2 shirts. I don't want to cry, I don't want to hurt. So I did that. And he got home. Sure enough, he was upset from work. And he called me in his room and he found a reason and he just started hitting me. The problem was it didn't hurt. I didn't cry. And
mm,
he didn't understand why. And then he caught on and he checked and he said to me, you know what, go next door and get naked and then come back in. So he had me walk across to my room. I got naked. And I can remember this to this day. He had his coffee in his hand. I could hear the spoon turn into coffee. And he had me come back in the room. And we just looked at each other and he went about doing what he did. I remember that day, that day was this feeling of helplessness.
mhm,
And as a man, I I experienced that of feeling at times helplessness because I didn't have a space to go and share what I was feeling. I didn't have anywhere to go and
mhm.
share that I feel like shit today.
Right.
I feel like a fucking horrible father.
Mhm.
I just fucking yelled at my kid. What the fuck am I doing? Like, I don't want to do it, but I'm still doing it. And I see myself doing it, and I can't stop myself from doing it.
Yeah. Well, you're human.
But that helplessness, that
Right.
peace that came in was such a struggle because I just didn't know what the fuck to do.
Mhm.
And that's when these thoughts of like, maybe I'm better off not being here come in.
Mm,
And that's a scary place to be.
sure. Sure.
So you talk about struggling as a man,
Yeah.
that's definitely a possibility that happens. For me, I was deep in it. I was in a dark place. Before I knew what a dark night of the soul was,
Right.
I was in a dark space without the ability to just show up somewhere and be like, bro, I suck today. Like, listen to me, hear me, see me, man. Don't tell me you got how to fix me. Just fucking hug me. Just tell me you care. That's all. Just tell me that you care.
Well, now you
And
feel like you have that support now.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have that support. I have brothers that I know I can call and be like, bro, like, pff. And it's like letting out the steam. It doesn't build up. It doesn't build up.
No pressure cooker.
No pressure cooker.
Do you have a few suggestions for men on where to start or what to be aware of or just what to do?
Brothers, we know when we know. We know that we know. And if the mind is saying no, but the heart is saying yes, that's the opportunity to start tapping into that divine masculine.
Oh, that's brilliant, Hugo. That's brilliant.
Because what I've learned is the mind will take me in paths that distract me, keep me out of my body. But if I'm willing to listen to the heart, that divine masculine kicks in and it knows more than I know mentally. And it'll put me in places where I need to be.
Yeah.
And it could be a cafe, it could be a brother, it could be a person, just a phone call. I think I've spoken to so many therapists where I'm like, hey, I just need a session. I need a help. That was a huge learning piece for me, just willingness to ask for help. Because we're not supposed to. I
Right.
wasn't supposed to. I was
Not
supposed to be
supposed to
able to
need
handle
help
this shit
either.
on myself. Yeah.
It's supposed
I
to
was
be.
to figure out how to be a father by myself. No, man, being a father takes creativity and it takes people to reflect off and a constant course correction and what works. I have 3 kids. What works with one doesn't. So I have to say the
Right.
same thing 3 different ways, but it
Sometimes
takes
4.
4. Then I got to speak to myself a certain way. Then I got to learn how to communicate with my partner. That's like 4 different communications happening at once.
Right.
And the divine masculine knows how to do that. And it organically feels into that.
Well, when you talk about the heart, this is something I have to diligently practice as well, because as brilliant as the mind is, there's also some duality and separation here. The heart is where source resides. The heart is where we are connected to oneness. The heart is where truth resides.
Yeah.
And this is, if we operate more, all of us from here, and I'm not talking about in a kumbaya kind of way, but if we drop from our mind into our heart and operate from here, we are connected. And that's when, as you said, you know where to go, you know what to do, you know what you need in that moment, and you know how to be of service in that moment. If you can bring it always to the heart, this can only take us so far. It ultimately has to come to here. This can help us execute what the heart is telling us.
For sure.
There's a role for both, but ultimately, if you don't drop here, you're missing spirit.
Yeah.
You're missing your connection to source, where that wisdom is.
Yeah. And that's where this gentleness and the grace and the self-forgiveness was a big one for me.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the thing that we all struggle with. But, with some of the things you were sharing, I imagine that'd be pretty tough.
Self-forgiveness was something that everything I experienced did was like, it created this thought pattern of like, everything's my fault. Like in a weird way, like I got abused because I was too weak not to get abused.
Yeah.
I got hit because I wasn't lovable enough to my father not to get hit.
I deserved it somehow.
I deserved it somehow. And I was living my life from that place of like, victimhood, victim consciousness of coming into things already at a deficit, already coming in thinking I got to, what's that word? I have to prove myself already in this relationship without even knowing the person. Like I got to already show up a certain way.
You're already in the hole.
I'm already in the hole.
Yeah.
I'm already starting from a deficit.
And you don't feel that now with your relationship.
There's times, there's more times I don't than I, how's that?
More often than not,
more often than not.
Okay.
But because that's still there. And I see it now as when those thoughts come in, it's almost like a little check-in. Like, how we doing with this, bro? Like, how are you maintaining this peace within you? Are you holding it strong? Or do you need to just go back and kind of do some work around it? But I just take it as feedback now. Like, I don't dive into that and go, oh yeah, you know what? It's not me. It's like, okay. It's showing up. That means it deserves some attention. Let's see what's there to look at.
I was just telling a client before our talk tonight about how the body gives you information about how you're feeling, and it's if we can pause this long enough to feel the sensations in our body, we can identify how we're feeling, because it's a constant journey of mindfulness, a constant practice of mindfulness. Okay, how am I feeling? What's going on in my body? How am I feeling based on what I'm thinking, based on this action? What is not serving me? Like what you're saying, am I going back to that old thought process and that old pattern, and to bring it back? But this is an indication. You have many opportunities of gauge
Right.
where you are with that, and it's just a matter of recognizing that and making that a part of your existence.
It's always on now for me,
Yeah,
and
can't
that's
turn it
what
off, can you?
can't
Once you wake
no,
up, you can't go back to sleep.
you can't go back to sleep. Once I tapped into the source, once I tapped into my heart, there was no going back to what it was
This is where the magic is.
because I had a reference point.
Yeah.
And it's like I knew it was possible to reach this place.
Mm,
But I went through this journey of like going to these amazing events, having these amazing breakthroughs, coming back home, and then I would contract. The
right.
integration piece will kick in.
Sure.
And sometimes I would fall back into the patterns deeper. But something in me, and this is the piece that I am so grateful for, in this whole journey, in looking back, there has been this light in me that has continued to propel me forward. In times where I thought I couldn't continue anymore, something in me said, you got one more minute in you. You have one more second in you. You have one more day in you. Just keep going, keep going. And that's the light that got me through these days of darkness as a kid, got me through the beatings of my father, and as a grown up, got me through these dark moments of just not understanding why I was so confused at times
Mhm.
about what it meant to be a man. I was so confused about what it meant to be a father, a husband. And so I had all these compartments.
Mhm.
I remember being in ceremony one time with medicine, and grandmother ayahuasca showed up to me and she said to me, look, it's not about compartments. Just be a good person. Have a good heart and let everything go from there. You can't piecemeal me. You can't fix here. You got to just be the source and let everything radiate from there.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
And that's when the self-forgiveness piece came in for me, because it became one of those things where it's like, you have I choose to forgive myself.
Mhm.
I don't have to. Nothing's I have to.
It's true. That's
I don't
very
have
true.
to be here. I don't have to do anything. I'm
Right.
choosing to engage in self-forgiveness, to have this experience of connection so that I can show up and be a present father, be a present husband, whatever that looks like, be a present friend.
To
But you're going
yourself.
to myself, but you're going to get the most authentic version of me that you're going to get.
Yeah.
And if it's cool, it's cool. If it's not, then okay, then I bless you on your way, but great. But what you're getting right now is the most authentic piece of me. And that for me takes this willingness to keep moving into that one light that showed up for me, that kept me going until this day, wakes me up every day and says, you got this day. You can do this today. You can have that conversation. You could tell your kids you love them. You could do this. You could do that. Nobody's going to hurt you. Like that I found, if anything else, my gratitude goes to that piece, that I found that blue flame that couldn't be touched.
That's your spark of source
Hmm.
that is within, perhaps.
Yeah.
And
And
then
that's
you
and
had,
that's where I'm rebuilding that relationship with source, with like from that
yeah,
place of
right.
knowing from that yeah, I could have died plenty of times in my life, but I didn't.
And you're just right there.
I'm
That's
right there.
it's just right there.
Mhm.
Wow. 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 Oh, okay. Do you have a final words to say to our audience, especially the men or the women or both?
Yeah, what's coming forward is, it's time, brothers. It's time to step in, lean in, and to show up and be willing to feel the feels. Be willing to feel the feels, to embrace, to know that at the other side of whatever is so painful right now is a space full of grace, gratitude, and love for oneself.
And how do we as women support the men on this journey?
I actually had this conversation with Tori because one of my things I was working on was being showing up and telling her where I was, my process. I would keep that.
Mhm.
But sometimes for me, the process didn't look the way she thought it was going to look.
Okay.
So
I
I
can
would say
understand
to be open and flexible to what that looks like coming from a man.
that. Okay. Just hold the space for what their journey, what their process looks like, and not what we think it should or what it has looked like for us.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I hear
Because
you.
because it's just so unique to everybody. And for me, it's to show up that way and be held that way was such a powerful conduit to just keep going
Yeah. Yeah.
because I could be at my worst in front of you and you're okay with me being at my worst.
And you're still here
And I'm still here
and they're still there.
and they're still there.
Yeah.
Because then it became a choice thing. We chose this to be
Right.
together. We choose this every day.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wow, Hugo, this was fantastic. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.